Tonight we have two presentations. Our first presentation is Jonathan Hack under item 9.1, Director of Sierra. Just bear with me here. Sierra Planning and Management. And is Jonathan there? There's Jonathan. Welcome. You're up. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship, members of council and staff and members of the public. Thank you very much for having us this evening. We'll be brief in our comments, but firstly, wish a Happy New Year to everybody. What we have is a presentation, so a colleague at the city is just going to help run through the slides, and just to focus on this one, we've been made aware, we're in the middle of really just at the beginning in terms of the public part of the work that we're doing. Our firm was retained by the city through a competitive process to undertake a review of road allowances in the city of Port Colborne. As such, we started out on a path of providing objective professional advice. And a little bit about our company, just for everyone's benefit. We're a planning and management firm out of Toronto, and been in business for around 10 years or so. And we do a lot of work around the province and nationally as well. All of it based on providing advice, a lot of it to municipalities on a range of issues, but including issues such as waterfront access and the public interest surrounding that. So that's who we are, and there's, you can find us on the web if you want to get a little bit more understanding of the work that we do. Now, if I could just ask to go to the next slide, that would be great. Thank you. So the purpose, I think, of this evening, if I can be as helpful as possible, is to recognize, firstly, that there has been some frustration indicated by members of the public as to how this study has been undertaken, how it's been commenced, and really just a desire to get more information about it. And I think that was triggered by one of our avenues of work, which is a survey that was targeted to a specific part of the city, that part of the city that has these road allowances which also function as informal beaches and beach access and access to the water. So pretty important aspect of community life, as well as throwing up a number of planning issues. But we certainly recognize people's questions and concerns. And so it was great that we have the opportunity to come out and, perhaps belatedly, but to begin that process of indicating to everybody what it is that we're doing, and more importantly, perhaps how we're doing it, so that we don't give the impression that anyone is being disenfranchised. Everyone's views to this, no matter how close you are to the issue physically, in terms of property ownership, but also your use of the beach is important. So firstly, just laying it out in terms of what we do, there were actually 8 road allowances that we are commissioned to look at. And I'll just read these off so we're clear on what's involved from west to east. So Lorraine Road, Weaver Road, Pinecrest Road, Cedar Bay Road, Silver Bay Road, Wildwood Road, Pleasant Beach Road, and a road that sort of isn't a road when you get down, it's more of a sand dune, but Holloway Bay Road, which is the location at the eastern end. So each of these, not all of these, have any kind of controversy in terms of the management of the access and the number of people coming in and using the beaches. But if we're going to look at one, the decision was, and I think it was absolutely the right one, is to look at all of them together. And obviously, any advice that we give as to how you manage that road allowance down to the shoreline is going to be specific to each and every one of these. So that's important for everyone to. Next slide. Thank you. It's just some images. We were lucky enough to go down on a bit of a fact-finding tour. I've been a tourist, up and down this area for years, but hadn't had to professionally work for the city on this file. But this was coming down and looking at these particular sites. And what we've got here is I just want to relay some implications of these. These we call them road allowances rather than beaches, simply because they're not managed as formal beaches in the city's parks and recreation infrastructure. Of course, however, they are rights of way. They are used by people, open to the public at large, per requirements of legislation. But more importantly, they're fantastic sites themselves. So, that the one at the top there is just a shot of actually from the right of way at Pleasant Beach Road, looking out into the property that's actually owned by Shirkston Shores. But to all intents and purposes, you can see the value of that vista and that opportunity for people, residents and others alike, to take advantage of those views. And then some of them differ. The one down at the bottom where you see the water channel, that's actually a Weaver, and that's more of a that is a functional element of drainage management next door to the road allowance, which is sort of just on the right side of the picture, but a very different scene. So any solution we come forward with is not going to be one where we come up with solutions for the sake of it or options. If it's not broken, we don't fix it. That's the mandate on a lot of this. And then the other image, the image to the left is simply that you have some vehicular gates in place already. Some of these are very much sort of winding trails down to the beach, and they have a very authentic nature to them. And then the one on the right side there, the large image, that's a particularly impressive location when you go down there. If you know Pinecrest, I believe I'm right in saying that's Pinecrest. You have a great sweep of view across the lake and across to a promontory, and it's just a fabulous site just to take in the views, if nothing else. So we just want to recognize that in doing this work, we are professional planners, as well as people that enjoy the environment as well. So what we're looking at these is not just real estate assets of the city, but active spaces that people use. So I think it was important just to get that point across. If I could just move on to the next slide. So in what we want to do this evening is sort of, communicate what the plan is. So everyone is at least clear, even if they don't perhaps agree with how we've done it so far, but everyone is at least clear that the method is designed to make sure that at the end of the process of studying those road allowances, we've actually made sure that everyone has an opportunity to voice their opinion and that we can take it on board. So the next few slides, I think, are very important. And I've just taken these directly from the work plan that we produced that was the basis for having the work awarded to us. So this is all about how we are actually doing the work. So, and I'll just read it for the sake of clarity. Our work plan started with, that the public and property stakeholder consultation is very important. There are a number of different perspectives that are relevant to creating a workable range of solutions for any of these road allowances in terms of their management of those spaces. And some of those groups are the public at large and beachgoers in general, adjacent property owners, which is where, as it relates to the survey, I think some of the issues have arisen from in the last couple of weeks. Potential commercial partners, meaning those that are involved in providing commercial tourist activities in and around some of these areas. Cottage owners as a distinct group, and I can give a bit more detail on that, as well as council and of course, management of the city. And I should just, for everyone's benefit, recognize that when we were putting a proposal together to do this work, the city made it very clear to us that, you know, consultation had to be full and comprehensive through this because of the importance of the issue, and that wasn't lost on us. And that's why we have written it this way, and then why we went into further detail. So let me just ask if we could go to the next slide, and I deal with each of these constituents in turn. So on that first one, the public at large and the beachgoers. So our approach to this was to make sure that the public at large is fully involved in this. However, because this is a study of road allowances rather than a citywide issue as it relates to the property related impacts, those living close by, what we did do is decide that it is important for us to get out there and survey the residents that are located close to the road allowances, and from that then engage in further public consultation that has to happen. So the city had produced a recreation parks and master plan. Now there's nothing really specific about the road allowances in there from what I could have a look at. I did have another quick look today, but that's in part because these are not formal beach spaces for the city. But the issue of trails and access and waterfront, these are all things which were clearly articulated by the public to the consulting firm that did that work. I thought it was a great document. And so we did come into this, I think, with a fairly good understanding that access to the waterfront, the shoreline, is not only really important for people, the residents of Port Colborne, but we know that it's important in Niagara region generally. And it's quite a well-known process of some of the municipalities, you know, seeking to purchase waterfront lands as they come on stream, no pun intended, to be able to take advantage and improve the public amenity. So we were confident that although we had to get on with the research, we would be coming to the public and having good conversations. So the idea was initial range of solutions based on some of the research tasks that we had laid out, and then coming back to the public. And of course, it should and could be a very formal process where the public is given a full opportunity to comment on a range of solutions that are put on the table for each individual road allowance. And that actually lends itself in some ways to having what would have to be virtual these days, but Zoom meetings where we actually produce materials and the public is able to have a real-time discussion of their views on some of those items, but also their views in terms of some of the principles that are being discussed. So that was the public at large and the beachgoers. If we could go to the next slide. Thanks. So this is the one I think that caused a little bit of confusion, for which we do apologize if anyone has felt frustrated that there was something going on in terms of the survey, but it wasn't available to everybody equally. But the idea is, it's a standard sort of planning tool, is that, you know, we had the areas that were under discussion, which is really the road allowance at the beach, but also the road allowance going north, you know, where people park and so on and so forth. And how far do you move up that road? Well, we made a decision that there was going to be a zone, and we sort of wanted to include more rather than less, and arrived at roughly Highway 3. So a pretty large area, about 1,000 homes or properties involved in that list. And, you know, one of the techniques is then you develop a survey that will allow property owners who can raise questions about not only their views about access, but are there any implications for their own residential amenity, meaning their enjoyment of the property? Are there any conflicts? And so on and so forth. So we developed that approach and then created an online survey for property owners. And because we know that a number of the property owners are based outside of the community. It was important that we enable them to receive that survey. So I'll address some issues of the particular concerns around getting mail to the US, but I think around 40% of the property owners in that zone had US addresses for purposes of receiving correspondence from the city. So a general sort of online approach, just putting it out there on social media and the city's website for a property survey that is, and remember this, is designed to be focused on a particular geographic area. The public consultation was this larger piece that would happen later. It is important that it went via mail. So that's why we adopted that approach. And as we say here, reinforced with an RSVP-based Zoom meeting to discuss the findings of the property owner survey engagement. So after we get these surveys back and we get some intelligence, we can then go back, certainly through a public process, to engage everybody, including the property owners as well. So I hope everyone would agree that it's a fairly in-depth approach we've taken. Next slide. So there are other groups. There is Shirkston Shores, and there are others in the area. There are some user groups, people that use the water for recreational activities, and we wanted to make sure that we interview and get their views as to what the issues are, if any, and what might be lacking, or what their perception is in terms of what might be lacking on the public side of the road allowance. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the cottage owners were important, and we wanted to make sure that we accessed them, and hence we did so through our method. Next slide. So this one's a bit long, and I know council has it, and hopefully you've had a chance to read it, but it really rounds off the whole approach to our reporting, is that, we're trying to create a range of solutions, policy-based, site-specific, maybe enforcement-based in terms of parking and public access. Could have an element of partnerships in terms of some of the services that might get provided. But this is the important point. It's there as a basis for meaningful and productive discussion with the property owners, but also the public at large as well. And so moving on to the second paragraph, the report, this is all from the work plan. The reporting phase will then absorb all of the preceding work and consultation into a report that covers all of the elements that relate to both near-term and longer-term planning for the road allowances. Once complete, the report will be shared with staff for initial review and revision as necessary. And then going forward from that, the reporting can then be provided to council and the public at a meeting, and ultimately prioritized actions communicated in terms of operational capital planning by the city, including development of partnerships, bylaws, and other commitments to effective management of the road allowances and the impacts of these informal public spaces on surrounding property interests, as well as the overall safety and enjoyment of the city by its residents and visitors. So just to summarize the work plan involved making sure that we will communicate and get feedback from property owners, the public at large, and beachgoers in general, as well as commercial interests, and of course, cottagers as a discrete group that may not even reside in Ontario. So that's what we did. It's a lot to digest, and I'd be happy to take questions. But before that, I just want to respond to a couple of the questions that came across my desk based on some emails to members of council and to staff. So there's about 4 or 5 points. So let's just deal firstly with US residents filling out the survey. So there has been a delay. We're told possibly up to 5 weeks. That was from a resident in the States who had just anecdotally told us that there have been significant delays. That was made known to us after the survey had gone out, and eventually that mail will arrive. But of course, you would be disappointed if the survey had closed at that point. So, whether the survey letters, which have the link, arrive soon or are significantly delayed to those addresses in the US, we need to address it. And there's a couple of ways to do it. And we can talk about that. But one would be extend the date of the survey completion from January the 22nd to a reasonable date. The other one is obviously to publicize the web link as well, so that you don't need a letter. You just need to get the word out that those on the US side of the border can fill out the survey. So that one is important, and we recognize the importance of the US base. The other question, one other sort of related question, is why are we surveying over Christmas? And again, that's a good observation, and we do a lot of surveys in the work that we do, and ordinarily you would not survey over a holiday period. You would not survey the public or host public meetings in July or August, because people are distracted, they have other things on their minds. Notwithstanding that it is a year affected by the pandemic, when there is less travel, the primary reason was that we needed to get on with this project because we want to be able to provide some policy advice prior to next beach season this year, 2021. But more importantly, this was, again, just to remind everyone, this was not a general public survey, not intended to be. And it was designed to be focused on those property owners. And so typical to the method that you follow, that goes out to those particular property owners by way of a letter. So notwithstanding the complication of the US border and not getting those letters to those members, the fact of we're not going to miss people if they receive the letter, whether it's Christmas or not. So I recognize the question, but we had thought about it, and I think there's no issue. As I said, the only thing that we probably should do is make sure that we're, we don't have a hard deadline for completion of the survey. So push it out by a couple of weeks if that's necessary. Council can throw in their view on that as well, but I think we need to work with people given the complexity of the current economy. Another question that came out was, one particular observation was, you can only fill out one of these surveys, you can only do it once, and then you can't fill it out a second time. What that actually is, meaning there was a household where there were two people that wanted to express different views on these issues. Normally, we wouldn't expect households to be divided on issues of, residential amenity, property amenity, but that's neither here nor there. If people want to fill out the survey twice, the reason we limit it, as we do in many such surveys, is simply to limit it to that particular device. In other words, it is in the rare occurrence that somebody can go on and fill out the survey multiple times and potentially swing the results. So say there was that intention, we want to typically avoid that. And to the extent that a survey like this that is geared to property owners in the area, every survey that we do, we ask ourselves the internal question, should we or should we not have that limiter on? So we've left that limiter on. So if there's a second device in the home, then the survey can be filled out by another person. But that again is the reason for us effectively limiting the survey, to get one opinion from the household, but more importantly to avoid any abuse of the survey. And I'm not suggesting people are going to abuse it, but it's a standard practice so that we can all have confidence in the results. The next item was some consideration that, and again, because of the confusion that perhaps we caused with this, and again, there's certainly no intention to do that, that maybe the city has already made up its mind it's going to do something with these rights of way that might involve, loss of public access, sale, or whatever it might be. And I just want to sort of give you an indication of the value of doing this kind of survey. So one of the questions at the end, the last question, asks for each of the road areas, what would you consider to be appropriate? And there's some options: fencing, maintain the current policy of vehicular gates, adding more parking, selling the road allowance lands at the shore to private owners. That was one category. And then partial sale, but retain emergency access and pedestrian access, or creating public parks. The results are provided for each individual road allowance, but I can tell you that as of today, mid-survey, the number of people in percentage terms that have indicated sell the road allowance, for example, is minuscule. It's less than 2% generally. So that, to me, demonstrates the value of the survey, right? This is going to be something that is going to be, to another question that was asked, will you be able to see the results of the survey? Absolutely. We can provide the full results. We obviously are going to write our interpretation from those survey results, but I think everyone should have the right to see the results of their efforts. So that was an important aspect, I think. Just to sort of reiterate that the survey tool that we have, that people have been concerned about, is but one element of the process here. It's an important element, and going forward, you know, we want to have that survey focused on the area residents principally. But I do understand that people from outside of the area have wanted to weigh in and have been filling out the survey. And I think my only advice at this point is the last thing we want to do is stifle anyone's opinion. But if you are doing that and you're providing your view, notwithstanding the questions that are very specific to where you live in the area, if you still want to go in and talk about what you'd like to see happen with these road allowances, just please write in your actual address, because then we can at least understand that we can separate the views of those that are closest to the right of way from those that are outside. And it does make a difference. There is a public amenity as well as a private amenity side to this debate. So that's really all I wanted to say at this point, Mr. Mayor. I'd be happy to field any questions that any members of council have.
Great, Jonathan. Thank you for the presentation. Before I take questions from council, I'm just going to go to our CIO, Mr. Louis, with regards to his thoughts on behalf of staff with regards to an extension on the survey. Mr. Louis?
Sure. Through your worship to council, I appreciate the insight that Mr. Hack had on the issue of the American addresses and my first time hearing it, 5-week delay in mail getting to cottage owners who reside in the United States. I have a few people who reached out to me who reside in America, particularly over the holidays. They've heard on Facebook or from email conversations with Canadians that the survey is taking place, and they've said that they haven't received it. A couple of them are watching for me. I get an email every day or a couple of days that says whether or not the letter has showed up or not showed up. And I think we can sort of use, once I have some confirmation from those folks that they are getting the letter, we can use that as a sort of proxy for how long it's taking for those letters to reach, and extend the survey deadline, the amount of time to complete, by the same amount of time. So where we sit right now, 2 or 3 weeks, I'd almost tend towards the middle of February 10th or 15th, if John agrees, and if council approves that, we can leave the survey open and make sure that we give everybody ample time to complete the actual task of answering the questions.
Okay. Just before I take questions, John, is that fine if we go to the middle of February? Is that doable at this time?
Yes, it is, Your Worship. And I would just sort of just add that one of the, over the Christmas period, the chair of the Property Owners Association of Pleasant Beach reached out to me with that indication of some of the challenges in getting mail to the US. And so we emailed the link to her. And so to the extent her association covers a number of the US residents, they will have by now received the link to the survey. But I'm in full agreement with Mr. Lewis' opinion that going, as far as February the 15th, I think is certainly suitable.
Okay, thank you. Because I think there, and as the CAO indicated, there probably is a bit of a caveat there because he will keep track through those that have contacted him in case it needs to be extended. But we've got another meeting at the end of this month that we can do it anyways if he's finding people still aren't receiving it. So is that a good general consensus with council? Is that fine to initially go to the 15th of February and have Scott keep track? Is that okay with everybody? Just give me a wave if that's all right. Okay, that seems fine. Any questions on that? On that portion, just on the 15th, with a caveat that Scott keeps an eye on it? Okay, that's good consensus from council. So, Mr. CAO, as long as, make sure staff and obviously John knows that because he's here. Going to general questions. Please raise your hand for those that want to ask a question. I have Councillor Beauregard.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Hack. If a respondent puts in their address as you recommended that they do, because you can go through and segregate the sample properly, if they put in their address, their responses will still be confidential, correct? Like you won't be able to associate, like the general public who reviews the statistics won't be able to associate their answers to themselves, to that address, correct?
John?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Beauregard, yes, absolutely. It's very important that the responses are aggregated rather than disaggregated. So there would be no, even when we produce the results as a package, the individual responses would be analyzed so that we're making sure that there's no association with a particular address. Absolutely, it's very important that we do that so everyone has full confidence that they can offer their opinions with the assurance that nothing will be put out in the public realm.
Okay, Councillor?
Yes, and another question. How many people have responded to the survey today?
John?
I'm going to let my colleague, who you haven't met, Ira, answer that. I asked him to come along to the meeting, so Ira, if you could.
I believe it was the 575.
And how many are we aiming for in terms of sample size?
I'll address that. These are opinion surveys. It's targeted to a geographic area. We've got a very large number. I think we're going to need to, as I said, sort of re-emphasize again to people who maybe aren't living in the area but really felt that they wanted to have their voice heard. If you've already filled out the survey, leave it at that. But if anyone else put their information in if they're outside of the area. And the reason that's important, Councillor, is that we will want to be able to look at the results from people within a certain distance of the road allowances where, cars do park and people do come past their driveways and so on, versus those that live outside of the area. In terms of sample size, as you probably know, generally in the sort of 400 range will give you sufficient confidence that your answers can be representative. But as you probably also are aware, that really does depend on the nature of the question as well. If the question is particularly complicated, or such as like, what's your name? My name is, it's not going to get replicated across the survey to the same degree. So there are a few questions where we could absolutely say, yeah, this has got great statistical accuracy, and there'll be others where I think we would not be able to. But I think if you leave it with us, what we'll do is we'll make sure when we write this up that we take into account all of those aspects.
Councillor?
Yes. Yes, thanks for that. And definitely the larger the sample size, the better, the more statistical accuracy there'll be if we go into the subgroups. So I look forward to that. My last question is, when do you expect to have the findings and the final report come to council?
That's a good question. So as there are a number of different work streams going on, so as you know, there is the good old-fashioned planning analysis as well, and that we are land use planners and we're looking at these as pieces of the public realm and how do we improve some of them. Some of these sites, just to one member who was in touch with us today, a member of the public, who said, for his particular area, he wasn't sure there was an issue. So there some public information about what the problems were. So some of these road allowances will not have much for us to comment on in terms of how the city should function. Others, like Pleasant Beach Road, that's where we're going to spend quite a bit of time providing some advice. Once we get through the survey, I think we're going to start to put the solutions in place very quickly. Probably still not draft a letter though, because I think, as you saw from my methodology that we put out there, I want to come back to the public and have that meeting and say that this is the bookends that we've come up with, and are we passing the smell test of the public on some of these things. Once we get through that meeting, so let's say that meeting is, let's say it's before March break, we could then move because if the survey goes to February the 15th, let's just say by the end of February we have that meeting. I think we could move very quickly so that by the time people are, council has to really consider getting some infrastructure in place and some decisions made about bylaws and things of that nature, that you'll have a report in hand that's been vetted through Mr. Louis and colleagues at the city. So early, I would say mid-spring would be what you're looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. So far I have next would be Councillor Bodnar, then Councillor Wells, then Councillor Caleff. Anyone else have questions? Councillor Bruno is 5. Anyone else? Okay, Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenter. John, just go through again, please, how people north of Highway 3 can be involved in this. Would it go on our website? Where's the link that they're going to actually be able to do a survey, or do they just email their concerns in? How does that physically happen?
John?
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. I'll answer it, and maybe we could also, if Scott wants to weigh in on this, because we did sort of just discuss it briefly. But I guess there's, I don't think we're naive enough to say we're going to stick to the methodology. If you live north of Highway 3, do not do this survey. If the link is out there in some way and people want to fill it in, they're going to find that the first few questions, it's going to be difficult for them to fill in relation to a piece of land that's a long way away from where they live. But they can still do it. They can still get through the survey, and they can register their opinion. Again, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, but it's important for us. We need to get accuracy of where people live. Fill in your address, so that we're not going to discount the results, but we need to be able to have an accurate relationship for that particular survey between, which property you're speaking about and the road allowance at the beach. That's important. If the link can be, if the link is now published or available, I think maybe we open it up for people to do it on a system that I suggested that is done. Other than that, I don't recommend a separate survey at this point for the public at large. Just follow our methodology that once we have the results of the survey, we're going to come back with a structured Zoom public meeting that will allow people to weigh in and give us their opinions in real time. And that can involve, as you know, from using Zoom, perhaps we can actually do surveying of people in real time using that public forum. So that's what I would suggest at this point.
Councillor?
Sure. Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor to John. So I'll just make a statement that while we certainly want this to come to an end at some point, I don't think we should rush it if we get into a situation where we have to take another month or something. I mean, we'd like to do maybe some things this summer, but it wouldn't be disastrous if we need to, do it right and get all the info we need. So I, for one, won't be holding you to a deadline if we need a little more time to get it right. Thank you.
Good, thank you, Councillor. Next I have Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to John. Thanks for the presentation, John. In relationship to the availability of the survey results, since there are a number of different portions or pieces to this puzzle, will you be making available the results of each piece individually? And if so, when those are available, are we okay to publish those on our website?
John?
Through you, Your Worship. I think the answer is yes to that, if I understand it correctly. You are, Councillor, suggesting that by road allowance we publish the results? Was that what I understood?
Councillor Wells?
That is correct. Yes, that's correct, Mr. Mayor. The other aspect on that, though, was will you be publishing those results as they become available, or will you be holding them all until the final result?
John?
Yeah, holding them until the final result, for sure. Not a good idea to just dribble stuff out. I think, the statistic I gave you tonight about the preponderance of people that might be looking for one solution versus another is really just to help those people that are worried about preemptive conclusions from the study, but in fact the survey can help do the opposite to that. So no, I think it's important that once given that there is a clear public concern to make sure this is done properly and that there's transparency. Once we conclude the survey, so say it's February the 15th, it's very important, as you say, to have the results broken down for the particular road allowance, because it's going to be different by every road allowance. We can get that out and that can be published, but let's do it at that point rather than now, for example.
Councillor?
Thank you. I have a couple other questions. With regards to the situation, I have been advised that there have been some people that have been able to fill out the survey actually into the double digit numbers. Should we be doing any thing to try to corral this at this point in time? I.e., should we put on our website a notice that if you've submitted a survey, please let us know your address, or just so that we can confirm the actual audience that we have received the survey results from, and also that maybe there's an opportunity here for us to go the second round on that survey to encourage more people to participate in it. And that may be more directed towards Scott rather than towards you, John.
Yeah.
Scott, you want to comment?
I want John to go first and I'll follow up.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to go? Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, sorry, I was struggling with the mute button for some reason there. I think, if you've heard anecdotally that the same person has registered a result, a dozen times, and I'd asked Ira maybe to unmute here as well. I think, we have a limit so that on any one IP address, you can only do it once. So that's either using different machines or they have a level of technical capability that's sophisticated. I'm not sure, but I think at this point, if people are going to fill out the survey because they have an interest to, I think we should allow them to do that. But recognize that the nature of this survey, if you look at it, it's not asking about the general public's view. It's asking about the view of the property owners on this. So, I don't want to sort of encourage people to fill out the survey who may live out of the city and then have them get frustrated with that particular survey instrument that wasn't designed for that. As I mentioned, our methodology is very, very clear. Once we're through with that and we understand what property owners are saying, we can then have a broader public conversation that can include everybody else. And at that point, I'll leave it and maybe let Scott talk about the efficacy of some other vehicle as well.
Scott?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Wells, I'm not sure I 100% understand the question, but to the extent that I think I do, I guess on the one hand, it's disappointing to hear that some people are trying to skew the results, and I think there's eventually a point where statistically, you know, we might have to eventually throw out the survey. I don't think we'll get there, but if we have 1,200 results for 1,000 homes, you know, it ends up being taxpayers' money, city money down the drain. So I really hope the community isn't sabotaging the efforts to get valuable input. I've had a lot of people saying, how do I make my voice heard? And really, the way you make your voice heard is by completing the survey the way it was intended to. I guess if that kind of abuse continues, we'll have to sort of caucus with staff and the consultants and see if we need to throw out the results of the survey or start with a new survey and try to get results, the appropriate results, the second time. But I really want to sort of resuscitate or salvage this survey. And I want to echo Jonathan's comments, which are the survey, and I know it was poorly received by some people in that there were some comments received by city staff about why there isn't a broader group of people allowed to participate. And really those questions, and I'll encourage you to go through, I don't think I shared it yet, but I have a printout of the survey, so you don't even need to go onto the internet for council members to see the questions that we're asking. They're questions like, has your driveway been blocked by parked vehicles? Have you had experiences with litter? Have you had experiences with people's behavior? And these questions are designed to get a feel for the experience of the local resident. And the questions aren't particularly relevant to someone from Bethel, north of Highway 3, or someone from downtown Port Colborne, or, you know, Westwood, or somebody from out of town, Welland or Niagara Falls or St. Catharines, who's a beach user. There will be, and I'm just echoing what Jonathan's already said, there will be those opportunities to provide that input as we move through this process. But the survey is designed to get that user experience or that local resident experience. And I think it does do a good job of that if it's used properly.
Councillor Wells?
Thanks, Scott. One final question here, and this is directed through you, Mr. Mayor, to John. Because there are a number of different parts to this puzzle, as I said, can you identify sort of the sequence of what is going to happen from now until the final input session is and final outlay of the results are?
Yeah.
John?
Yeah, through your worship. Yeah, happy to. Thank you for the question. So survey complete, let's say February 15th. We'll spend a day or so just, you know, making sure those results can be published. So to Councillor Beauregard's point, not having any individual results leak out, but have it as an aggregate. That will be useful. Then we would itemize our work is ongoing in terms of looking at this as planning solutions, you know, the road width, the urban realm, parking spaces, possibility for amenities, you know, the suitability for that in one area versus another. If we look at Weaver, you know, I was down there. If I was looking at it from the point of view of if I were a family coming down there through this right of way, would I have any concerns about the drainage channel and things of that nature? So there'll be a number of things that we would comment on. The survey comes in. We've talked to people, some of the commercial interests. We will then lay out in a format, as I said, the bookends of solutions, and then facilitate a public meeting. Let's say, you know, around sort of mid-March time. That would then, after that, we would be able to write it up in terms of our recommendations, a slate of preferred solutions for the right-of-ways as a whole, and present it back to staff. And if Scott and colleagues, you know, planning and community services and ECDev are happy with what they see, it would then go to council. But so it will have already been through a second round of public consultation by that point.
Counselor?
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Good, thank you. Counselor Clayliff?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Jonathan. Just a quick question. I just wondered, you said you've had 575 replies. What was the number of surveys that were sent out via mail? Do you have that?
Jonathan?
Yes, through you, yeah, Your Worship. Yeah, I don't have a precise number, but I would be, and that's Ira, you have the number there, but I think it was probably about 1,050, something like that.
I don't have the exact number on me, but I think that's close to it.
Yeah.
Good, that's good to know. Thank you.
Is that it, Counselor? Yep, okay. I have Counselor Bruno, then I'll go back to Counselor Bodnar. Counselor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Jonathan, for the excellent report. Jonathan, I want to drill down into something that maybe it's a joint answer between you and the CAO. We've concentrated on the survey and the public input. We've concentrated on, what this will do perhaps for this coming summer beach season. And you alluded earlier on to having looked at the Tourism Master Plan Parks and Rec report. And what I want to know is, upon the completion of gathering all the public input and collating that and distilling it, where will that intersect? And I'm going to use an example with this, with staff, outside agencies, i.e. emergency, EMS, things like that. The reason I ask the question is I've seen before where the post-public input didn't end up intersecting with other tourism master plans and report. And the example I'll use is a place near us where there was great import on the road allowances and their benefit as a tourism entity. And there was that level of public support that the council wanted to indeed enhance that. What it failed on was that it really looked at it in isolation from operations at the city, i.e., so, if you've got 2 public beaches now and 5 of the 8 want to have, it more available to recreate, of course, that's all fine and dandy. But if you're, sending folks around and maintaining 5 66-foot wide entities while you're still trying to do 2 beaches, it becomes obviously a little unruly in a 90-day kind of season, if you will. So can you tell me and those listening, what will happen with your findings on the public survey as it interfaces with Tourism Master Plan, Parks and Rec, and staff? And perhaps that's a Scott duty. Thank you.
Start with Jonathan.
Thanks. Yes. So it's a great question. Our experience, it cuts into tourism, into Parks and Rec, and onto operational matters. So we tend to come at these things with that lens. So we don't usually come out so effusive that there are great things you can do. Build a pier. It'll be fine. 7 piers out there. We're not going to do that. But we're going to recognize that there is an integration to be had. A couple of these road allowances lend themselves very nicely to just the most sort of subtle public realm enhancements, just to make them a little bit more appealing. And you've got cycle networks, you've got all sorts of things. So we are going to have that approach, but I don't think it's for us to come in and back the city into a corner and say, you must do this. I think there's a range of things. One could be confirming an approach that you've taken on bylaws. recognizing that the residents are either happy or not so happy with the gate control, mechanisms and things of that nature as it relates to vehicles. Recognize that these are open road allowances, right? They're not closed. So that there is a duty to provide the appropriate access. And then there are these strategic considerations, such as these are fabulous spots. I mean, this is Caribbean when you go down there on a day and you see white sand and turquoise water. And so is there something that the city should be doing with its nodes of these vistas that are created? So yeah, there's absolutely a tourism approach. It's important not to be short-sighted in any of these solutions. So hopefully that's what we'll be able to bring back to the discussion in due course.
Scott, do you have anything to add?
Through your worship to Councillor Bruno, I think that's exactly why we're here. These 8 road allowances to varying degrees are tremendous community assets. One of the hardest things, and for the years that I've worked here and the many years that you've been on council as a group, the collective you have been on council, one of the hardest things we do is reconcile the recreational use with the residential use. And the residential use is divided into 2 components. Further, that's the people who have private beach access in front of their homes and cottages, and the folks who are a little bit up the road allowance who enjoy the 66 feet. Depends how you look at it. On the one hand, you can sort of say we only have 66 feet. We bring down a lot of people, and all of a sudden there's that reconciliation exercise. There's also garbage and security and parking and all of the issues that come with it. The flip side of that coin is we have 66 feet of beach. It's an asset that people can use and enjoy and come down and get access to the lake where otherwise they can't. In terms of economic development, there's interest groups that enjoy these accesses, such as the kite surfers and wind surfers that are well known in some of the beach areas. Ice fishing in the winter time. It's an amazing city asset that we have. It's just going through this exercise of making sure that the assets are used appropriately for all stakeholders. And I think that's why the exercise that we're going through considers all of those diverse stakeholder groups. So the comment is, I think staff have a good handle on sort of the importance of this to council, and the consulting company does too, and we want to do a good job of bringing council back the most suitable recommendations for all of the stakeholders.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I like that. I want to keep that balance between, access and not overcapacitating. So thank you.
Good, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to, this may be Scott, but I'll let John chime in if he wants to. But Harry and I are getting a lot of emails and phone calls, and maybe other councilors are too. And part of it is from people, at least myself, that are not necessarily south of Highway 3, but still use these road allowances. And if I forward an email to the city that I've gotten, what are we doing with those? Can we be assured that they're going to be compiled by somebody and the views that are coming through that way, while it may not be on a survey, are actually gathered somehow and make it into the mix of thoughts on this?
Scott, you want to start?
Sure. Through your worship to Councillor Bonner, that's a great question. So there are some folks who are reaching out to council members directly, to me directly, or a combination of those by CCing a number of people on an email message. And I am trying to reply to all of those. There is a certain amount of letters that have been copied. People are sending the same letter to try to influence the outcome of this. I don't know how to say this. I hope this doesn't come across as insensitive as it sounds like it's going to. This isn't the time for that yet. The best way to influence the outcome of the exercise is by completing the survey. It's not time to be a delegate to council yet. It's not time to email your council member and say, don't do this or do this. The survey and the public meetings is step one. However, the clerk's office has committed to keeping track of everyone who reaches out to the clerk's office, so to the city. So we won't know if this goes to an individual council member, but to the extent that the clerk's office is emailed about when is this coming back before council, we'll keep a database and we'll make sure that those people are notified. We also have every intention of doing as much public awareness of this issue being back in the council chambers and the public meetings. So I think in terms of process, we heard today, there's going to be some public meetings coming up over Zoom, virtual meetings. We're going to administer those as best as we can. And then we're eventually going to have a final report before council. So my commitment to council is to use our communication staff here at the office to make sure we get the word out as good as well as possibly can be done. And again, to keep that list of people in the clerk's office who wish to be informed when this is back before council.
Thank you, Scott. Jonathan, anything to add? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Yes. Just to agree with Scott that I know it's people naturally want to get their points across, particularly if there's any anxiety about a study which they weren't necessarily aware of. But I think it is important to hold your powder a little bit and recognize that you can get some issues out on the table, and then come along to the public meeting that will be advertised. And if there's an email address that we have on file, or if Ms. Lapointe has as a result of collecting the information, so much the better. We can make sure that they are given full information as to when that meeting will happen. And then when, as I said, go back to what I'm saying, when we've bookended the options and we've given our opinion on what we think should happen, people can obviously weigh in again. And that typically would be through a comments form of some kind, as well as in real time survey questions that we do put forward sometimes on Zoom. So whilst I recognize everyone's concern, I think once we get through this process, there's going to have been good opportunity for public review, even before it comes back to you as members of council as a final document to look at.
Good. Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So just a little clarity here, and it might just be the speech thing. I kind of like what Scott's saying more than John's saying. And the word I'm keying in on is Scott used meetings with an S, and John uses meeting. I just want to be assured if we need more than one meeting, there's going to be more than one meeting. So
yeah,
just, am I correct on that, John?
Well, yeah, I will check our what our work plan said. As consultants, we view the world as in terms of the commitments that we make via a work plan. But I think just to get serious about it, if there is a desire for meetings as opposed to meeting, that's fine. That can affect work plan. I've got to be honest, because when we have multiple meetings with the same product, you're usually asking different constituent groups what they think. If you're talking about multiple meetings with the public at large, then normally what you're doing is you're taking a product and you're changing it, and then you're coming back and you're changing it again in relation to people's input. If you're doing it in good faith, and that can change the nature of the work plan. That's all I would say.
Fair enough. Thanks.
Good. Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Beauregard, and I have Councillor Bagu. Councillor Beauregard?
Through your worship to Mr. Hack, going back to the part of the discussion where we're talking about the sample being skewed because of multiple people answering the survey multiple times, can we, in a way to prevent that and throwing away the whole sample and everything that you've done up to now, which would be awful, can we not just make it mandatory that the participant enter their address prior to getting to the substantive questions? That's all.
Jonathan?
Can I ask Ira to tell us collectively how that issue of address and progress through the survey, aside from the finding another machine to do the same survey again, if you just walk everyone through that, that would be great, Ira.
Yeah, the the survey asks for your address very early on, and it's a mandatory question. Somebody could, somebody could conceivably just go on Google Maps and put an address that's not theirs. But then we would hopefully be able to identify any duplicates. So we would be able to kind of analyze the results that way. But yes, they have to enter an address in order to complete the survey.
Okay. Counselor?
Thank
Thank you. Yeah. Then when you do the analytics, it'll be easy to filter out any duplicate responses. So that's all that matters. Thanks.
Good. Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Baggio?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Since we started asking questions to the CAO, I figured this one was for him. First, a comment. I was sort of surprised I got the first email regarding the survey. I knew some sort of survey was going out, but I had no idea when it was going out and by who. As a counselor, I should have known that ahead of time. The other thing is, can we not put the scope of this survey on our city website? Maybe the CAO and John can work together, but in plain language, put out to the public what we're doing right now, because what's going to happen before the end of this week, before it hits the local newspaper next week, there's going to be all kinds of emails flying around again. And I do appreciate the CAO for responding to emails on his holidays. Better him than me. But is it possible we could put out on our website with our acting corporate communications? There's nothing on there today. I'm just wondering to put the whole scope, what we're going to do, explain it all. It would make it so much easier for the public to understand what you're going to do. Not everybody's going to watch this on Zoom or YouTube or whatever. So I just wonder if that's possible to Mr. CAO.
Scott?
Through your worship to Councillor Baggio, I'm going to try to answer everything, and I hope I get it in, it might not be in the right order, but the first question I think was around why wasn't council aware? And that's a great question. It's a fair question. I wasn't aware myself. We actually, I don't touch everything that goes out of City Hall. I did approve the survey questions when they were sent to me from the consulting firm and from staff. I didn't know that it was going out. I think we mailed it between December 8th and December 18th by the time that the address list was compiled and so on. I talked a little bit to the ward councillors about this, and I guess it's tough to, it's a hard thing for staff to know what exactly council needs to know. So for example, this same consulting company was awarded another job at the city, which is the Marina Business Plan. And as that job rolled out and unfolded, we didn't share that work plan with council members, and it also didn't attract as much attention as this attracted. And it's hard to know in advance how much attention something's going to attract. However, this is a lightning rod issue. It has been in council chambers for 3 or 4 or 5 years, and probably longer than that. And yeah, according to the mayor, longer than that. And I probably should have made sure that council got a heads up on that. And I will apologize for that and take that back to staff and make sure that council is getting that awareness. The second component, I'll answer in 2 parts, which was about the website and so on. I'm not trying to sound insensitive. I'm not trying to sound like the city doesn't value the opinion of everyone who's a stakeholder, but this survey was very much targeted to a particular group of people who had a particular experience with being close to the beach. And for that reason, it wasn't broadly marketed that it was going on. The letter was the marketing. So for example, on our city website, we are doing some surveying around customer service and the customer service experience that people are having when they deal with the city. Whether it's a building permit, a water meter, any kind of customer service issue. And that is being marketed because it's for everyone. What we didn't want to do is confuse people by marketing a survey that they weren't meant to participate in. And that's the reason it wasn't on the website up until recently. Now, you did say that it wasn't on the website today. I did ask staff to put it on, and it looks like something was posted on Thursday, the 7th, under news and notices about the road allowance study. That, I understand that's not front and center. I think we also did some social media communication around the survey. We wanted to make sure people were aware that the survey, that we were aware of the concerns that were out in the community, and make sure that people were aware that we were going to address it in my emails back to public that you've referenced. I always told people that this council meeting was going to be taking place and that the consultant would be presenting to council. So we are now, I guess, righting what would have been a wrong by not having that information available to the entire public, and it is on the city's website. I can make sure tomorrow when I'm talking to communication staff that we make sure it's front and center, so you'll be able to find it when you go on the website. As you've said, you weren't able to see it today, so I'll make sure that that's addressed.
Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, that's all.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, seeing none. Jonathan, Ira, thank you very much. That was very in-depth on this. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to this coming to a head here at council, and we can move forward with the beach issue, or road end issue, actually. They're not, technically they're not beaches, as the CAO is always telling us. So again, thank you guys, appreciate it.